If education in Africa must achieve its full potential by the year 2030, then issues of accountability in public spending and teacher training, amongst others, must be addressed. These were some of the recommendations made at a session which examined the challenges bedeviling African education systems, held under the auspices of the Global Education and Skills Forum 2018. There is more in this report. According to the United Nations, Africa's youth is set to double by the year 2050 to 850 million. And being the key asset of the continent, the lack of access to employment for this burgeoning population in the light of digitalization of the fourth industrial revolution in the West is the concern of this panel tasked with the topic, Education in Africa in 2030. The panelists, drawn from various international organizations, acknowledged the setbacks in African education, but chose to look at the possibilities.
Ethiopia is one example I know firsthand, but there are multiple. Ethiopian government, as recently as 2000, 60% of Ethiopian children were denied the chance to go to school. With concerted investment at the highest levels on the continent and a focus on real innovation using mobile schools, investing in latrines to create access for both boys and girls, Ethiopia has actually dropped that number at an incredible rate, such that 86% of young Ethiopian children are now enrolled in school.
Still, the challenges in African education systems like curricula and preparation for jobs ahead of 2030 could not be avoided, particularly during the interactive session.
The government has to move away from using education as a gimmick, because this is the future of kids in the rural communities where I think they suffer adverse inequality. Me, I've declared Sierra Leone's education system as an emergency.
You could mention a few things that you would rather see being incorporated in the curricula for Africa and not the future of going out and using the skills.
As Africans, why the heck are we still hungry for British GCSEs and you know, all of this nonsense? And even in the WAS, the West African Senior Secondary Certificate Examination, you know, they all have to do Shakespeare. It's like I say, yeah, I love Shakespeare, but, you know, that's not what's going to get you a job unless you know how to use that really well in a very exciting, creative way, which is not what's happening.
I think education is a necessary but not sufficient condition for economic development. And we should just be thoughtful about the role that education plays in the broader context of macroeconomic policy, which is not to curtail our ambition at all, but just not to set ourselves up for epic disappointment.
Participants at the end of the forum harped on the need for African governments to show more accountability in the expenditure of education funds.
Most times when we go out and they are talking about giving assistance to most countries, I never hear them mention Nigeria. And I'm sure it's because of what you just mentioned, that they mismanage funds. I think our country needs to be hard on those who fall short of this kind of thing.
Things that are discussed here and they go back home, how we can implement them is by having these conferences allow for the opportunity for activists, for civil societies to interact with politicians, and so that when they go back home they can bring that relationship with them and be able to create a partnership that would allow for the organization to reach its mission and for the government to do right by its people.
The resolution of these educators is that unless increased funding is combined with innovative solutions, the yawning gap in the digital revolution between Africa increasing beyond 2030 will be the continent's sad reality. Bukola Samuel Wemimo, TVC News.